AITA for refusing to let my cousin stay in my house after she told everyone it was already hers. I, 34F, have lived in my house for 6 years. It's a 3-bedroom home in a quiet neighborhood, modest but comfortable. I worked hard to buy it, saving for years, taking extra shifts, and living frugally. I take pride in my independence and the life I've built here. My cousin, Leah, 29F, has always been more impulsive. She switches jobs frequently, moves from city to city, and tends to make decisions based on what feels convenient or fun in the moment rather than long-term stability. I've helped her occasionally with advice or small financial support, but I've never let her live with me long-term because she tends to overstay her welcome and push boundaries. About 2 months ago, Leah called me in tears. She had just broken up with her boyfriend and had nowhere to go. She asked if she could stay with me just for a couple of weeks while she figured things out. I agreed, feeling bad for her, but I made it clear that it was only temporary. She would need help with groceries and chores, and she could not treat my home as her own. She seemed relieved and promised to respect the arrangement. The first week was fine. She stayed in the guest room, cleaned up after herself, and helped a little with meals. But after about 2 weeks, her behavior started to change. She began bringing in more of her belongings, rearranging the guest room without asking, and leaving her things in shared spaces. She started referring to the guest room as my room in conversations with friends, and even invited several friends over without checking with me. When I came home one afternoon to find them in the living room, she said, "Oh, don't worry. I just wanted them to see my new place." That's when I realized she was starting to act like the house was hers. A few days later, I began hearing from relatives and mutual friends that Leah had told everyone she was moving in permanently and that I had already agreed to it. I was shocked. I confronted her, and she laughed it off, saying, "I just told them that so no one would pester me about finding a place. They'll understand later." I told her this was unacceptable, that she needed to make plans to leave, and that I would not allow her to take over my home. She became defensive and accused me of being selfish and mean, insisting that families should always support each other. The situation escalated further when she went to our parents and told them I was throwing her out with no notice. My parents called me upset, asking why I wasn't letting her stay. They suggested that I could easily accommodate her since I had a spare room, and that refusing her was being harsh. I tried explaining that I had already given her temporary shelter and that she was now misrepresenting the situation, but they kept pressuring me. My mom said I was being too strict and selfish, while my dad implied that family obligations should come before my personal comfort. Leah also started posting pictures on social media of herself in my house, with captions implying it was her new home, tagging friends and relatives. Some people even messaged me, asking when I would send money or help with living expenses, assuming I had agreed to cover her stay. I explained privately that I had never agreed to a permanent arrangement, but the rumors continued. I tried to compromise by offering her a few extra days and asking her to contribute more to groceries and chores, but she refused. She insisted that since I let her stay temporarily, I should allow her to stay indefinitely. She also made comments about the furniture, the layout, and my belongings, framing them as if she had a right to make changes because this is now my space too. I feel guilty because she is my cousin and she is going through a difficult time. At the same time, I worked extremely hard for this house, and it feels uncomfortable to have someone act like they own it. If I let her stay, it sets a precedent where she might expect to take over my home whenever she has a problem. I also value my independence and personal space, which is being compromised. Some relatives have suggested I just let her stay to avoid conflict, but I feel that would be unfair to me and would reward manipulative behavior. I've already helped her, but now she is pressuring me and spreading misinformation to family and friends. It's causing stress in my home and among my relatives, and I don't want to lose control over my own life and space. So AITA for refusing to let my cousin live in my house permanently after she told everyone it was already hers, even though I initially offered temporary help. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious. When do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. AITA for refusing to pay for my cousin's wedding even though my family says I'm being selfish. I, 30F, come from a moderately close-knit family. We're not super wealthy, but most of us are comfortable financially, and family events have always been a big deal. My cousin, Jenna, 28F, recently got engaged. Her fiancé, Ryan, 30M, come from a very affluent family, and they've decided to have a lavish wedding next year at a destination venue. When Jenna called me to tell me the news, I was happy for her. I've always had a good relationship with her, and I wanted her to have a beautiful wedding, but things quickly became complicated. About 2 weeks after the engagement, my mom forwarded me an email from Jenna with a wedding budget outline. At the bottom, there was a line that said, "Family contributions expected from close relatives. Suggested contribution, $2,500 per person." I was shocked. I hadn't anticipated that attending her wedding would require me to spend thousands of dollars beyond travel and accommodation costs. I live paycheck to paycheck and have significant student loan debt. I also recently had to cover a medical expense for my brother. While I brought it up to Jenna, she told me that it's common practice for family members to help cover wedding expenses, especially for destination weddings. She explained that most of her other aunts, uncles, and cousins were already planning to contribute at least $2,000 each. I told her I couldn't afford to contribute that much. She got upset and said that it would be disappointing if I didn't support her special day in a meaningful way. I tried to explain that my support isn't measured by money. I could help with planning, designing invitations, organizing pre-wedding events, or even helping with DIY decorations. I even offered to take a weekend to help her at her rehearsal dinner or bachelorette events. She said that while those offers are nice, they don't offset a lack of financial contribution. Then my mom got involved. She said I should find a way to contribute because family comes first and that refusing would make me look selfish. She reminded me that Jenna has been a huge part of my life growing up and that this is a once-in-a-lifetime event. My dad echoed the sentiment, adding that even if I have financial concerns, it's about prioritizing family milestones over personal expenses. I tried to compromise further. I told my mom I could contribute a smaller amount, perhaps $500, but they insisted that wouldn't be enough and that I should stretch a little. I explained that stretching would put me in debt and create real financial strain, but they said I should consider loans or using my credit card. When I brought it back to Jenna, she said I was being ungrateful and unsupportive and that she couldn't believe I wouldn't step up for her wedding. She mentioned that other cousins and relatives were already planning to contribute generously and that I was the only one hesitating. I told her that my financial situation is different and my inability to give $2,500 doesn't mean I don't care about her or her wedding. She got defensive and said that love doesn't come in small gestures. It comes in action, and that a meaningful contribution is money. My extended family has since weighed in. Several aunts and uncles have called me privately to say they understand my situation, but that it won't look good if I don't contribute the expected amount. Some cousins have said they'll still be supportive, but a few have subtly suggested I'm not pulling my weight. I feel torn because I genuinely care about Jenna and want her to have a beautiful wedding. I've been brainstorming ways to help that don't involve a large financial contribution, but it seems like nothing I do is being accepted as valid support. I also feel frustrated because my parents are pressuring me and making me feel guilty, even though they know my financial situation. I worry that if I stick to my decision, I will damage my relationship with Jenna and possibly other family members who see my refusal as selfish. On the other hand, if I go into debt to contribute $2,500, I could jeopardize my financial stability for months or even years. I've tried explaining this to my parents, but they argue that family comes before money and that it's just a temporary sacrifice. At this point, the situation has caused real tension. I feel guilty and stressed, and my relationship with my mom has become strained because she keeps bringing it up at family events. Jenna has stopped responding to some of my messages, and I fear she may be upset with me permanently. So AITA for refusing to pay $2,500 toward my cousin's wedding even though my family says it's expected and that not contributing makes me selfish? AITA for refusing to let my cousin's wedding be held at my family's private lake property after she assumed it was available? I, 34F, inherited access and partial ownership of a private lake property from my grandparents several years ago. The property has a small cabin, a dock, a boat, and a surrounding area that is heavily forested. It's not large enough to host big events comfortably, but it's perfect for quiet family gatherings or weekends away. I've always maintained it carefully, and I use it for solitude, small family get-togethers, and fishing trips. My parents and a few close relatives know about it, but it's always been understood that any major events would require my explicit approval. My cousin, Claire, 30F, recently got engaged. She is very social and loves hosting big parties. About 2 months ago, she casually mentioned in a family group chat that she wanted to have her wedding near a beautiful lake and implied that our family property would be perfect. I didn't respond immediately because I was busy, but a week later, I was inundated with messages from other relatives excitedly asking if they could bring tents, rent tables, and book caterers at my property for her wedding. I was surprised because at no point had Claire asked me directly for permission. I texted her privately and said, "Hey, I noticed you've been talking about using the lake for your wedding. I just want to clarify that it's private property and we need to discuss it before making any plans." Claire responded as if I was being difficult. She said, "Oh, I thought it was fine. Everyone knows it's our family's lake property. It's perfect. It would save a lot of money. We already started imagining it." I reminded her that while it is a family property in terms of our grandparents' estate, it is legally my responsibility to approve any events there. She said, "You're being ridiculous. It's a family place. Everyone should benefit. It's not like I'm asking you to give me $1 million just to host a wedding. The problem is that the property is not equipped for a large event. The cabin only has 2 small bathrooms. There's limited parking, and the forested area could easily get damaged by tents, tables, and hundreds of guests walking around." I explained these concerns, but Claire brushed them off, insisting that everyone will be careful and that it would be magical. A few days later, I started receiving messages from her fiancé, his parents, and extended family, all treating the property as a done deal. Some even suggested I should help coordinate logistics since I know the property. At this point, I felt blindsided. They were making arrangements, budgeting, and assuming access without my consent. I told Claire and her fiancé firmly that the property would not be used for the wedding. I offered to suggest alternative venues nearby that could safely accommodate the size of the event, but she got upset. She said I was selfish and trying to ruin her dream wedding over a property that, in her words, is owned by the family, not just you. Things escalated when she posted on social media asking for tips for decorating a private family lake property for a summer wedding, tagging our extended family and friends. Comments poured in congratulating her and discussing arrangements, which made me feel like everyone assumed I had already approved it. I reached out to my parents to clarify that I would not allow the event. My mom said that technically I am within my rights, but she encouraged me to consider the family because Claire is really excited and this could make her upset. I understand her point, but I don't want to sacrifice my property and peace of mind for a large event that could damage the land and infrastructure. Claire has since been sending me passive-aggressive messages, saying things like, "I guess I'll have to find a less cooperative family member," and "I didn't realize you cared so little about tradition," and family. She's also told other relatives that I refuse to let her have the wedding she dreamed of, which has caused some family members to subtly criticize me. I've offered reasonable compromises, such as hosting a small family brunch at the cabin or assisting her in finding a nearby venue with a similar view, but she says it's not the same and continues to insist that my refusal is selfish. I feel guilty for upsetting her, but I also feel like it's completely unreasonable for her to assume she could use a private property for a large wedding without my explicit permission. Friends and coworkers I've discussed this with say I'm right to protect my property, especially since it wasn't a gift or public venue. Some family members say I should be flexible for family happiness, but I'm worried about setting a precedent where people assume they can use my property anytime they want. So, AITA for refusing to let my cousin hold her wedding at my family's private lake property after she assumed it was available and started planning without my approval. AITA for refusing to give my sister access to my inheritance after she pressured me to share it despite not contributing to caring for our parents. I, 36F, recently inherited my parents' house and savings after they passed away within a few months of each other. I was the primary caregiver for them during their illnesses, while my sister Melissa, 39F, lived in another state and visited maybe once or twice a year. I handled most of the medical appointments, coordinated with home health aides, cleaned their home, managed bills, and spent countless nights at the hospital. I also emotionally supported both parents until their passing. When the will was read, the house and a significant portion of the savings went to me, while Melissa received some smaller personal items and a minor cash gift. My parents explicitly stated in their will that the house and primary inheritance should go to the person who had shouldered most of the caregiving responsibilities. The lawyer explained that this was meant to acknowledge the time, effort, and emotional burden I had taken on. Melissa was quiet at first, but a few weeks later she began sending texts and emails that grew increasingly insistent. She said I should be fair and share the inheritance equally because we were both their children. I reminded her that she hadn't contributed significantly to caring for our parents and that our parents had made it clear who they wanted to inherit the house and the majority of the estate. She argued that her contributions didn't need to be physical or financial, claiming that she provided emotional support over the phone and helped make some decisions from afar. While I appreciated that she called occasionally, it was nothing compared to the constant hands-on care I provided. I tried explaining this, but she dismissed my points, saying I was minimizing her role and letting money divide the family. Melissa then escalated the situation. She said that if I didn't agree to give her at least half the house or a significant portion of the savings, she would take legal action. She even suggested she could contest the will, claiming undue influence because I had spent so much time with our parents during their final months. I was stunned. I explained that our parents had independent legal counsel, and the will explicitly reflected their wishes, but she said that lawyers could find a way to redistribute the assets. Family members began getting involved. Some cousins and aunts said I should compromise to avoid conflict, while others privately told me Melissa had no claim since she hadn't contributed meaningfully. Melissa also started telling friends and posting subtle comments on social media, implying that I had taken everything from her and that I was greedy. A few weeks later, she called me crying, saying she was hurt that I wouldn't respect her needs and that she lost her chance to live in the house we grew up in. I reminded her that our parents had made the decision, and it wasn't about me. It was about honoring their wishes. She accused me of holding a grudge and said I was punishing her for not helping more, which I found insulting because I had never expected her to pay a price for her absence. Things got worse when she tried to involve mutual friends, telling them I was being selfish and cruel. I received texts from people I hadn't heard from in years, some sympathetic, others asking me to do the right thing and give Melissa part of the inheritance. I started feeling stressed and overwhelmed, but I refused to give in because it would violate our parents' clear wishes. Melissa then suggested that we could at least co-own the house, so she could visit whenever she wants and even contribute to mortgage or maintenance. I explained that co-ownership would be a logistical nightmare, that I intended to live in the house, and that this would give her rights to make decisions in a place that had been my primary responsibility for the past few years. She became very angry, accusing me of locking her out and being controlling. During this time, I also learned she had been telling other relatives that I was hoarding the inheritance and didn't care about family. Some relatives tried to mediate and suggested I could give her some cash or help her buy a smaller property nearby. I considered it, but she kept moving the goalposts, insisting she deserved more than any compromise. I realized she wasn't negotiating reasonably. She wanted to claim the main inheritance regardless of our parents' intentions. I recently had a confrontation where she showed up at my house unexpectedly, demanding access to the property. I told her she was not welcome and that I would call the authorities if she did not leave. She accused me of turning the house into a fortress and said I was destroying the family over money. I stood firm, explaining that respecting my parents' wishes was more important than placating her. The rest of the family is split. Some understand that Melissa never contributed significantly and that I am within my rights, while others think I should give in to maintain peace. I feel a mix of guilt and frustration because I never expected my inheritance to cause such conflict, and I feel like I am being painted as the villain for following the instructions my parents left in writing. AITA for refusing to give my sister access to my inheritance after she pressured me to share it despite not contributing to caring for our parents. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move in after she told everyone I already agreed. I, 32F, have lived in my apartment for almost 7 years. It's a 2-bedroom place in a city I love, not huge, but perfect for me. I worked really hard to get here, saving for years, working extra shifts, and avoiding unnecessary spending. So it's been a huge personal accomplishment. I value my independence and privacy a lot. My best friend, Hannah, 31F, has always been spontaneous and a little reckless with money. She moves frequently, changes jobs without planning, and tends to rely on others when she runs into trouble. I've helped her out with advice and small financial assistance before, but I've never let her live with me long-term because I know she can be difficult to manage in a shared space. About 6 weeks ago, Hannah called me crying. She had just broken up with her boyfriend and had nowhere to go. She asked if she could stay at my apartment temporarily, just for a few weeks while she figured out her next steps. I agreed, thinking it would be a short-term solution, but I explicitly told her it was temporary, she would need to contribute to groceries, and that she could not treat the apartment as her own. She seemed grateful and promised to respect my rules. The first week was fine. She stayed in the guest room, helped with some chores, and didn't interfere with my space. But after 2 weeks, things started to change. She began bringing in more of her personal belongings, rearranging furniture without asking, and leaving her things in the living room and kitchen. She started referring to the guest room as my room in casual conversations with friends. At first, I thought she was joking, but then she invited 3 friends over while I was at work. When I came home, they were sitting in my living room, and she said, "Don't worry, I just wanted to show them my new place." That's when I realized she was acting like the apartment was hers. A few days later, I started hearing from friends and relatives that Hannah had been telling people she was moving in permanently and that I had already agreed to it. I was shocked. I never agreed to let her live here long term. When I confronted her, she laughed and said, "I just told them it so they wouldn't bug me about finding a place. Everyone will understand later." I told her that was not acceptable and that she needed to start planning to leave. She became defensive and accused me of being selfish, saying that a friend should always help when someone is struggling. Then things escalated. She went to our mutual friends and told them I was kicking her out with no notice. Social media posts started appearing with pictures of her in my apartment, captions implying it was her new home, and tags to friends and family. I got messages from multiple people asking when I would help with rent or send her money, assuming I had agreed to cover her stay. I clarified repeatedly that I had not, but the rumors kept spreading. I tried to compromise by offering a few more days if she helped with chores and groceries, but she refused. She insisted that since I let her stay temporarily, I should allow her to remain indefinitely. She also started making passive-aggressive comments about my furniture, the way I cooked, and how I arranged the apartment, framing them as if she had the right to make changes because this is now my home too. I feel guilty because I want to help her and she is going through a difficult time, but I also feel trapped. She is misrepresenting the arrangement to family, friends, and social media, creating pressure on me to give in. If I let her stay, it sets a precedent where she might expect to take over my home whenever she faces a temporary problem. I also value my independence and privacy, which is being compromised. Some friends and family have suggested I just let her stay to keep the peace, but that feels unfair to me and would reward manipulative behavior. I already help her by letting her stay, temporarily, but now she is pressuring me and spreading misinformation to make it permanent. I don't want to lose control of my own home or let her manipulate the situation. So AITA for refusing to let my best friend live in my apartment permanently after she told everyone it was already hers, even though I initially offered temporary help. AITA for refusing to let my brother and his wife stay in my house indefinitely after they needed a place for a few weeks. I, 37F, own a 2-story house in a quiet suburb that I've lived in for about 8 years. I bought it on my own, pay the mortgage, and handle all maintenance and bills myself. I take pride in keeping the house clean, organized, and secure. I like having my own space, and I'm very protective of it. My younger brother, Luke, 33M, and his wife, Hannah, 31F, have always had a more spontaneous approach to life. They rent an apartment in the city, but tend to move around a lot and have a habit of relying on family in times of crisis. I've helped them in the past, including letting them stay for a few days during emergencies, helping with small loans, and assisting when they've had work issues. I've always tried to balance helping with keeping my boundaries. A few weeks ago, Luke called me saying that they had been locked out of their apartment due to a plumbing emergency that left the unit uninhabitable. He asked if they could stay at my house for a couple of weeks while they sorted things out. I said yes, assuming it would be short-term. I told them that they could stay in the guest room, but that I expected them to respect the house rules and that it would be temporary. Luke agreed. At first, things were fine. They stayed in the guest room, used the kitchen respectfully, and kept their belongings contained. I reminded them daily that this was temporary and that they needed to find another place quickly. Luke and Hannah kept reassuring me that it would only be a couple of weeks. 2 weeks turned into a month, and they still hadn't made arrangements to move back to their apartment or find another rental. I reminded them that my house isn't an indefinite living space for anyone, and that I couldn't accommodate them long-term. They said they were still figuring things out and asked for more time. I reluctantly agreed to extend it for 1 more week, emphasizing that it was still temporary. By the 6th week, it became obvious they weren't making serious efforts to move out. Hannah started leaving clothes and personal items in shared spaces, spending hours in my kitchen cooking large meals, and inviting friends over without asking. Luke began treating the house as if he had permanent residency, moving furniture slightly, leaving personal items on counters, and assuming I would clean up after them. I told them firmly that they had overstayed and that they needed to make arrangements immediately. Luke argued that I had let them stay this long already, and that it was stressful to move again so quickly. Hannah added that it would be difficult to find an apartment on short notice and that I should be understanding. I reminded them that while I understand emergencies happen, the expectation was always temporary, and the house is my private property. This escalated when Luke started involving our parents, claiming that I was unreasonable and selfish for refusing to help family. They said I should let them stay until they found something suitable, and implied I was being harsh for sticking to my boundaries. I tried explaining that I was happy to help in reasonable ways, like coordinating with a short-term rental, helping them look for apartments, or offering storage for some items, but that they couldn't live in my house indefinitely. Hannah then began leaving notes and text implying that I was being hostile, saying things like, "We just want a safe place for a while. Is that too much to ask?" And, "You always act like your house is more important than family." Luke started telling neighbors and friends that I kicked them out during a crisis, which caused some awkward encounters and made me feel like the situation was spiraling. I've tried negotiating compromises, such as them paying for groceries, limiting how long they stay, or letting them stay for 1 more week if they agreed to search for a new place daily. They rejected all suggestions, claiming that I wasn't being compassionate. They even suggested that since I helped them in the past, it was a family obligation to let them stay as long as needed. I feel exhausted and trapped in my own home. I have tried to be understanding and flexible, but this has gone far beyond a temporary favor. I've been forced to monitor shared spaces, manage boundaries constantly, and endure passive-aggressive remarks and guilt trips. It's affecting my mental health and my enjoyment of my own home. Some friends have told me I'm right to insist on boundaries, and that allowing them to stay indefinitely would be unreasonable. Other family members argue that I should show compassion, and that family should come first. I want to help my brother and his wife, but I also feel that being forced to host them indefinitely is unfair and unsustainable. So, AITA for refusing to let my brother and his wife continue staying in my house indefinitely after they initially said it would only be temporary, even though they are now pressuring me and involving other family members. AITA for refusing to let my roommate's brother move in, even though he says he's just in a rough spot. I, 29F, have been living with my roommate, Emily, 28F, for about 3 years. We share a 2-bedroom apartment in a mid-sized city, and our living arrangement has always worked well. We split rent and utilities evenly, and we have clear rules about chores, guests, and personal space. I work full-time as a project manager, and Emily works from home as a freelance designer. Our routines are different but compatible, and we get along well. A few weeks ago, Emily's younger brother, Josh, 25M, called her saying he had been evicted from his apartment after losing his job. He said he was struggling to find a new place and asked if he could stay with us temporarily until he got back on his feet. Emily mentioned this to me casually over lunch, and I expressed hesitation. I wasn't comfortable with another adult moving in, even temporarily, because our apartment is only 2 bedrooms and my bedroom is already small. I also value my privacy and need a quiet environment for work. Emily seemed frustrated, but said she understood my concerns. She suggested that Josh could stay in the living room temporarily, perhaps for a month or 2, until he found another place. I told her that even a month could be disruptive and that I wasn't confident I could maintain my work routine or personal space with a third person in the apartment. I also reminded her that we had pets and that Josh had never lived with animals, so it could be stressful for them too. Emily said that she felt obligated to help her brother and that I should understand family comes first sometimes. She mentioned that her parents supported Josh moving in and thought it would be the right thing to do. I explained that I understand family responsibilities, but that it's not my obligation to house someone I don't know well and who could disrupt my life. A few days later, Emily and Josh came over to discuss logistics. Josh was polite initially, explaining that he didn't have anywhere else to go and that he would do his best to be unobtrusive. I told him I was still not comfortable with the arrangement, but Emily argued that it was just temporary and that we could set ground rules. Josh then started making comments like, "I just need a roof over my head, I won't bother you, and you'll see, it won't be a big deal." I felt pressured because everyone else seemed to be assuming I would agree. The more they talked, the more I realized that Emily expected me to just accept it without considering my own boundaries. I asked whether there were other options, like staying with a friend, a short-term rental, or reaching out to local housing assistance programs. Josh said those options weren't feasible due to cost, and Emily insisted that our apartment was the best solution. She even suggested rearranging furniture and turning the living room into a bedroom, which would make our shared spaces cramped and uncomfortable. I finally said no. I explained that while I sympathize with Josh's situation, I have a right to maintain my living space and that adding a third person would create stress, disrupt our routines, and potentially harm my relationship with Emily. Emily got visibly upset, and Josh looked disappointed, though he didn't argue at the moment. Afterward, Emily started texting me constantly, saying things like, "I can't believe you're being so rigid, and sometimes you need to help family even if it's inconvenient." She implied that if I cared about her, I would let him stay. I responded that I care about her and her brother, but that doesn't mean I can compromise my own living situation. The tension escalated when Emily called our parents, who sided with her. They said I was being selfish and uncompassionate, and that helping Josh, even temporarily, was the right thing to do. I explained to them that my concerns are about practicality, privacy, and my work, not a lack of compassion. They dismissed this, arguing that sometimes helping family requires personal sacrifice. Emily has started avoiding me around the apartment and has made passive-aggressive comments about being stuck with roommates who don't understand family priorities. I feel guilty because Josh is genuinely struggling, and I want to help in ways that don't involve him living with me. I've offered to help him find apartments, assist with job applications, or even lend a small amount of money if necessary. But Emily and her parents insist that none of that is acceptable because it doesn't involve him staying in the apartment. I feel caught between wanting to support my roommate and her brother and maintaining my boundaries. I worry that this situation is damaging my friendship with Emily and creating lasting resentment. I also feel pressured and unfairly judged by her and her family for prioritizing my own well-being and space. So AITA for refusing to let my roommate's brother move in, even though he is in a rough spot and my roommate and her family say I should help. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move into my apartment after she needed a place to stay temporarily and then expected me to accommodate her indefinitely. I, 30F, live in a one-bedroom apartment in a busy city. I've worked hard to afford my place and maintain my independence. I live alone with my cat, and I'm very protective of my space because it's the first home I've truly owned and decorated entirely the way I like. I work full-time in marketing and often have late nights, so I need stability and routine to manage both work and personal life. My best friend, Carla, 29F, has always been a bit unreliable. She's had a series of financial difficulties over the last few years, often moving between short-term rentals, staying with friends, or relying on family support. Despite this, we've remained close. About 3 months ago, she called me in tears, saying she had been evicted from her apartment and had nowhere to go. She asked if she could stay at my apartment temporarily until she got back on her feet. I asked for details about how long temporarily would be. She said maybe 2 or 3 weeks. I agreed, thinking it would be manageable for a short period. The first week was fine. She stayed mostly in my bedroom. I cooked some meals for her, and I tried to make things comfortable. She promised to pay for groceries and help with chores, and I believed her. However, by the second week, she began taking liberties. She used my kitchen without cleaning up, left dishes in the sink, and started leaving personal items all over the apartment. She also insisted on rearranging furniture in the living room to make it more comfortable for everyone, even though the living room is primarily my space and I had decorated it specifically for my lifestyle. I reminded her that this was a temporary arrangement and that she needed to respect my rules. She said I was being uptight and that she was just trying to make the space feel like home. I tried to be patient, thinking it was part of her stress, but it quickly became clear she expected me to accommodate her needs over mine. By week 3, Carla started acting as though she had permanent residence. She brought over friends without asking, claimed that she could use my couch for sleeping even though she had a bedroom, and left her laundry in the bathroom. She also began using my cat's toys and food without permission, claiming it was just easier than buying her own supplies. I asked her to respect my cat and my belongings, but she dismissed my concerns. Things escalated when she started demanding that I adjust my schedule to accommodate her. She wanted me to run errands for her, pick up takeout, and even let her borrow my car for short trips. I told her repeatedly that I could not do these things and reminded her that the arrangement was temporary. She became emotional, saying I was selfish and that I didn't care about her well-being. At this point, I realized she had no intention of leaving. She mentioned casually that she might need to stay a few more months because she hadn't found a new apartment and her savings were low. I told her absolutely not, reiterating that this was not sustainable and that my home is my private space. She accused me of abandoning her in her time of need and began texting mutual friends, framing me as someone who kicked her out when she had nowhere else to go. Some friends reached out to me, saying I should be more accommodating and help a friend in need. Others understood that Carla had repeatedly abused the generosity of others and that my boundaries were reasonable. Despite this, she continued to pressure me, sending messages about how difficult it was to find a place in the city and implying that I was morally obligated to let her stay. She then started leaving passive-aggressive notes in my apartment, complaining about how uncomfortable it was for her and how little I was doing to support her. She also posted vague stories on social media about friends who turn there. Backs when people need help, which I knew was about me. I felt my personal space and privacy were being violated, and the constant stress was affecting my mental health. I finally told her she needed to leave immediately and helped her search for short-term rental options nearby. I offered to contribute to the first month's rent at a discounted rate, but I refused to let her move back in or have unrestricted access to my apartment. She became very upset, crying and yelling, saying I was selfish, cold, and ungrateful. She also threatened to stop speaking to me if I didn't let her stay. Since then, our friendship has been strained. Mutual friends have told me I should have compromised more, while others think I did the right thing by enforcing boundaries. I feel guilty because I do care about her and want to support her, but I also feel violated because my home, routine, and independence are being disregarded. AITA for refusing to let my best friend move into my apartment after she needed a place to stay temporarily and then expected me to accommodate her indefinitely. Hey friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what could be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. AITA for refusing to let my sister move into my house after she told everyone I already agreed. I, 36F, have lived in my 3-bedroom house for 8 years. It's not huge, but it's mine and I worked incredibly hard to get it. I saved for years, lived frugally, and took extra work shifts so I could afford this place. My home is my sanctuary, and I value my privacy and independence. My younger sister, Erin, 31F, has always been more spontaneous and less financially responsible. She moves frequently, jumps between jobs, and tends to make decisions based on convenience rather than long-term planning. Over the years, I've helped her with advice and occasionally small loans, but I've never allowed her to move in long-term because I know she can be difficult to live with. About 6 weeks ago, Erin called me in tears. She had just broken up with her boyfriend and had nowhere to stay. She asked if she could stay with me just for a few weeks while she figured out her next steps. I felt bad for her and agreed, but I made it very clear that it was temporary. She needed to help with groceries and chores, and she could not treat my house as her own. She agreed and promised to respect the rules. The first week went smoothly. She stayed in the guest room, cleaned up after herself, and helped a little around the house. But after 2 weeks, I started noticing changes. She began bringing in more of her belongings, rearranging the guest room without asking, and leaving her things in common areas. She started referring to the guest room as my room when speaking to friends. I thought she was joking at first, but soon it became clear she was serious. A few days later, I came home to find she had invited 3 friends over while I was at work. When I asked why, she said, "Don't worry, I just wanted them to see my new place." That was when I realized she was acting like the house was hers. A week after that, I started hearing from relatives and friends that Erin had told everyone she was moving in permanently and that I had already agreed. I was shocked. I confronted her, and she laughed, saying, "I just told them that so no one would keep asking me where I'm staying. Everyone will understand later." I told her this was not acceptable, that she needed to start making plans to leave, and that I would not allow her to take over my home. She became defensive and accused me of being selfish, claiming that families should always help each other. Then things escalated. Erin went to our parents and told them I was throwing her out with no notice. My parents called, upset, asking why I wasn't letting her stay. They suggested that I could easily accommodate her since I had a spare room and implied I was being harsh. I tried explaining that I had already provided temporary shelter and that she was misrepresenting the situation, but they kept pressuring me. My mom said I was being too strict and selfish, while my dad implied that family obligations should come before my personal comfort. Erin also started posting on social media photos of herself in my house, with captions implying it was her new home, tagging friends and relatives. Some friends even messaged me asking when I would help with rent or send money, assuming I had agreed to cover her stay. I clarified repeatedly that I had not, but the rumors kept spreading. I tried compromise by offering her a few extra days if she contributed more to groceries and chores, but she refused. She insisted that since I let her stay temporarily, I should allow her to stay indefinitely. She began making passive-aggressive comments about my furniture, the layout, and my belongings, framing them as if she had a right to make changes because this is now my space too. I feel guilty because she is my sister and is going through a hard time, but I also feel trapped. She is misrepresenting our agreement to family, friends, and social media, creating pressure on me to give in. If I let her stay, It sets a precedent where she might expect to take over my home. Whenever she faces a temporary problem, I also value my independence and privacy, which is being compromised. Some family members have suggested I just let her stay to keep the peace, but I feel that would be unfair to me and would reward manipulative behavior. I've already helped her by allowing temporary shelter, but now she is pressuring me and spreading misinformation to make it permanent. I don't want to lose control of my own home or let her manipulate the situation. So AITA for refusing to let my sister live in my house permanently after she told everyone it was already hers, even though I initially offered temporary help. AITA for refusing to let my friend use my house for her wedding photo shoot, even though she's insisting it's just a small favor. I, 32F, own a townhouse in a quiet neighborhood. I bought it a few years ago, and it's become my sanctuary. I spent a lot of time and money decorating, landscaping, and creating a space that feels personal and comfortable. I live alone, work full-time in marketing, and enjoy hosting occasional small gatherings, but I value my privacy and the integrity of my home. My friend, Claire, 31F, got engaged recently. We've been friends since college, and I've always been happy to support her. About a month ago, she asked if she could use my house and backyard for her wedding photo shoot. She explained that she loves the aesthetic of my place and that it would make her pictures look amazing. At first, I was flattered that she liked my home and considered it for such an important event. However, she then mentioned that the photo shoot would involve around 10 people, including her photographer, hair and makeup artists, and her bridal party. She said it would last for about 4 to 5 hours and that they would be moving furniture, adjusting decorations, and possibly using some of my belongings for props. I expressed hesitation and told her that while I appreciate her asking, I wasn't sure I was comfortable with that many people in my home for hours, especially because some of my furniture and decorations are fragile or sentimental. Claire insisted that it would be fine and really quick, and that she and her team would be careful. She said it was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and that it would mean a lot to her if I agreed. I tried to set boundaries, explaining that I wasn't comfortable with people moving furniture or using my personal items and that my house is my private space. I suggested alternative options, like a local studio, a rented venue, or even a friend's house with less delicate belongings. She said those options wouldn't have the same charm and that it would ruin her vision. I thought about it for a few days and ultimately said no. I told her I could not allow her to use my home for the photo shoot because it would make me anxious and disrupt my routine. I offered to help in other ways, like arranging a local venue, helping with props, or even suggesting other photographers who specialize in outdoor settings. Claire seemed upset, but didn't argue at that moment. A week later, she called me and said she had already explained to the photographer that my house would be available and that they had booked the date. She asked me to reconsider, emphasizing that it was only a small favor and that it would make her wedding day more special. I explained again that it wasn't a small favor from my perspective. It would involve a lot of disruption, risk of damage to my property, and emotional stress. I also mentioned that agreeing reluctantly wouldn't make me happy and could affect our friendship. She started saying things like, "I can't believe you're being so selfish, and friends are supposed to support each other, and this is literally asking for a favor." She implied that refusing meant I didn't care about her wedding or her happiness. I tried to explain that my support comes in other ways and that I'm still excited for her and willing to help in ways that don't involve my home, but she didn't seem to accept that. After that, she began messaging me almost daily, asking me to please just reconsider and think about how much this would mean to me. Some mutual friends have started weighing in, and a few have suggested that I'm being unreasonable because it's a wedding and it's a once-in-a-lifetime moment. One friend even said, "It's just a few hours. What's the harm?" I feel stressed because this is starting to affect my enjoyment of my home and my relationship with Claire. I'm worried that she may resent me permanently or that mutual friends might view me as unsupportive. At the same time, I feel that letting her use my house would compromise my personal space, put my belongings at risk, and cause me significant anxiety. I've tried to communicate clearly and offer alternative ways to help, but it seems like nothing is acceptable unless I let her in. My fiancé has been supportive and agrees that I have every right to say no. He reminded me that my home is my sanctuary and that I shouldn't feel obligated to give up my comfort or safety for someone else's photo shoot. I know it's a big event in Claire's life, and I genuinely want her to have beautiful memories, but I also feel like my boundaries are being dismissed. So AITA for refusing to let my friend use my house for her wedding photo shoot. Even though she insists it's just a small favor and says it would mean a lot to her. AITA for refusing to let my friend use my house for her wedding after she assumed it was available and started planning without asking. I, 32F, own a modest house with a large backyard in a quiet neighborhood. I've lived here for almost 10 years, and it's my sanctuary. I maintain the property myself and take pride in keeping it clean, secure, and organized. Over the years, I've allowed a few close friends to host small gatherings or weekend BBQs, but I've always made it clear that my house is not a venue for large events unless I explicitly agree. My friend, Sophie, 31F, has been in my life for about 12 years. She's outgoing, loves planning parties, and has always had a way of assuming that things are available for her use if she's friends with someone. I've generally enjoyed her company, but sometimes her entitlement can be frustrating. A few weeks ago, Sophie got engaged and immediately started talking about her dream wedding. She casually mentioned in a group chat with mutual friends that she wanted to have the wedding somewhere beautiful outdoors. A few people replied excitedly, suggesting my backyard, saying things like, "You know how perfect it would be at my name's place." I didn't respond at first because I assumed it was just chatter. A week later, Sophie messaged me directly and said she was so excited about having it at my house and started asking about details, capacity, parking, how many tents could fit, and if she could bring in a caterer and a DJ. I was completely taken aback. I reminded her that my house is private property and that I hadn't agreed to host her wedding. I explained that it's not suitable for large events, the bathrooms and kitchen are limited, and parking would be a nightmare for guests. I also mentioned that hosting a wedding would be extremely disruptive and could damage the backyard. Sophie brushed off my concerns, saying things like, "Oh, you'll be fine. Everyone will be careful. And your house is perfect, and it's a family-friend property, so it's basically public." She continued planning as if I had given her permission, even asking friends to RSVP and consider accommodations near my house. I felt blindsided and frustrated that she assumed my consent without asking. I tried to set firm boundaries, telling her that the property is not available for a wedding and that she needs to find an alternative venue. She got upset and accused me of being selfish, saying that I was ruining her dream wedding and that I was making it impossible for her to have a special day. She also started saying that since I've hosted friends before, it's only fair that I help her out. The situation escalated when Sophie posted on social media about planning her wedding at my house, tagging mutual friends and even local vendors, asking for decoration tips and catering suggestions. People started assuming it was confirmed, and several friends messaged me asking about details. I had to clarify repeatedly that the wedding was not happening at my house, which caused some tension and awkwardness in the friend group. Sophie then started sending me guilt-laden messages like, "I thought friends are supposed to support each other," and "I can't believe you won't help me make this happen. It's just one weekend." She implied that by refusing, I'm being a bad friend. I offered to help her find suitable venues nearby, assist with research, and even help with decorations once a venue is booked, but she said that none of that is the same as using my property. Some mutual friends have sided with her, saying I'm being rigid and that she shouldn't have to compromise on her special day. Others understand my perspective, acknowledging that it's my private property and that she shouldn't assume access or permission. My family also chimed in, with a few saying I should be generous for a friend, while others told me to protect my boundaries. I feel stressed and anxious about the whole situation. Sophie continues to drop hints on social media, making indirect comments about me being unhelpful or unsupportive. She's also sent passive-aggressive messages saying that if I don't let her use my house, I'm not really her friend. I've tried to be reasonable, offering alternative ways to help, But I also feel like it's completely inappropriate for her to assume I would host such a large and potentially disruptive event. My house is my personal space, and hosting a wedding would take weeks of preparation, risk damage, and limit my own use of the property. I want to maintain my friendship with Sophie, but I also need to protect my home and my mental well-being. I feel guilty because she's clearly excited about her wedding, but I also feel that being coerced or guilt-tripped into hosting is unfair and unreasonable. So, AITA for refusing to let my friend host her wedding at my house after she assumed it was available and started planning without my permission. AITA for refusing to let my fiance's mother stay with us indefinitely after she needed a temporary place and began taking over our home. I, 31F, live with my fiancé Alex, 33M, in a 2-bedroom condo that we purchased together last year. We both work full-time, Alex in finance and me in education, and we split household responsibilities evenly. This condo is our first home together, and we've worked hard to make it comfortable and private. About 4 months ago, Alex's mother, Patricia, 58F, called him saying that her apartment was uninhabitable due to mold and a pest infestation. She claimed she had nowhere else to go and asked if she could stay with us temporarily until she found another place. Alex felt bad and asked me if it would be okay. I said that a short-term stay, maybe a week or two, will be fine as long as she respected our rules and space. We agreed on this arrangement, thinking it would be manageable. The first week went smoothly. Patricia was polite, kept to herself, and didn't overstep boundaries. I cooked some meals that included her dietary preferences, and we tried to make her feel welcome. However, by the second week, things began to change. She started rearranging furniture, leaving her belongings in our closets, and using our kitchen without cleaning up afterward. She also started commenting on how small our condo was and how we should make it more accommodating for her. I reminded her that this was temporary and that she needed to respect our home. She dismissed my concerns, saying that since she was family, she deserved to be comfortable and that we shouldn't be so strict about minor things. Alex and I had a conversation, and he agreed with me that boundaries were important, but he also worried about upsetting his mother. I explained that her behavior was creating stress and infringing on our private space. By the third week, Patricia began acting as though she had permanent residence. She invited friends over without asking, claimed the living room as her space, and used our bathroom products without permission. She even tried to reorganize my closet to make room for her clothes. I confronted her, and she became defensive, saying she just wanted to feel at home and that she had nowhere else to go. Things escalated further when she started expecting us to adjust our schedules for her. She insisted that we take her to appointments, help with errands, and entertain her guests, claiming that it was inconvenient for her to do these things alone. I reminded her that we have our own lives and obligations, and that this was a temporary stay, not an opportunity to take over our home. She called me ungrateful and said that I was cold and selfish for not prioritizing family. After a month, Patricia casually mentioned that she might need to stay a few more months because she hadn't found a suitable apartment yet. I said absolutely not, explaining that our home is not suitable for indefinite guests and that I needed my space back. She became visibly upset, accusing me of turning my back on family, and said that Alex should convince me to be more accommodating. She also threatened to contact other family members to pressure us. At this point, the children in her extended family began visiting, claiming that she needed support, which meant even more people in our condo. She told Alex that he should make me allow this, because family helps each other, and that refusing was hurting her emotionally. I explained to him that helping doesn't mean surrendering our home or disrupting our lives, and he finally agreed with me. I gave Patricia a strict deadline to move out and offered to help her find short-term rental nearby. She reacted angrily, saying I was being unreasonable and letting money and comfort dictate morality. She accused me of being controlling and threatened to cut ties with Alex if he supported me. She also began telling family and mutual acquaintances that I was selfish and mean-spirited, which caused tension at several family gatherings. Some relatives have since called me to suggest I should compromise more or offer her a longer stay. I explained that my boundaries are not arbitrary. They protect my mental health, my privacy, and our home. Other relatives understand that her expectations were unreasonable and that I have the right to enforce limits. The situation has caused ongoing tension, and I feel guilty at times because Patricia is Alex's mother, but I also feel completely justified in protecting my home and maintaining my independence. I've offered her alternative solutions, helped her research temporary rentals, and contributed to moving costs, but she continues to frame me as the villain for insisting on boundaries. AITA for refusing to let my fiancé's mother stay with us indefinitely after she needed a temporary place and began taking over our home. AITA for refusing to let my friend move in after she told everyone I already agreed to it. I, 33F, have lived in my apartment for about 8 years. It's a 2-bedroom place in a city I love, not huge, but perfect for me. I worked extremely hard to get here, saving for years, working extra shifts, and avoiding unnecessary spending. So it's been a huge personal accomplishment. I value my independence and privacy more than anything. My friend, Lydia, 32F, has always been more spontaneous and less financially responsible. She moves frequently, jumps between jobs, and tends to rely on others when she's in a tough spot. I've helped her with advice and occasionally small loans, but I've never let her live with me long-term because she tends to push boundaries and overstays her welcome. About 6 weeks ago, Lydia called me in tears. She had just broken up with her boyfriend and suddenly had nowhere to stay. She asked if she could stay at my apartment temporarily, just for a few weeks while she figured things out. I agreed, thinking it would be a short-term solution, but I made it very clear that it was temporary. She would need to contribute to groceries and chores, and she could not treat the apartment as her own. She seemed relieved and promised to respect my rules. The first week was fine. She stayed in the guest room, cleaned up after herself, and helped a little with meals. But after about 2 weeks, things started changing. She began bringing in more of her personal belongings, rearranging furniture without asking, and leaving her things in common areas. She started referring to the guest room as my room in conversations with friends. At first, I thought she was joking, but then it became clear she was serious. A few days later, I came home to find she had invited 3 friends over while I was at work. When I asked why, she said, "Don't worry, I just wanted them to see my new place." That's when I realized she was acting like the apartment was hers. Then, I started hearing from mutual friends that Lydia had told everyone she was moving in permanently and that I had already agreed. I was shocked. I confronted her, and she laughed, saying, "I just told them that so no one would bug me about finding a place. Everyone will understand later." I told her that this was not acceptable, that she needed to start planning to leave, and that I would not allow her to take over my home. She became defensive and accused me of being selfish, insisting that friends should always help when someone is struggling. The situation escalated further. Lydia went to our mutual friends and told them I was kicking her out with no notice. She also posted photos of herself in my apartment on social media, captions implying it was her new home, and tagged friends. Some friends even messaged me asking when I would send money for rent or help cover living expenses, assuming I had agreed to cover her stay. I repeatedly clarified that I had not agreed to a permanent arrangement, but the rumors kept spreading. I tried to compromise by offering her a few extra days if she helped with chores and contributed to groceries, but she refused. She insisted that since I let her stay temporarily, I should allow her to remain indefinitely. She also started making passive-aggressive comments about my furniture, the layout, and my belongings, framing them as if she had a right to make changes because this is now my space too. I feel guilty because she is my friend and she's going through a tough time, but I also feel trapped. She is misrepresenting the arrangement to friends and on social media, creating pressure on me to give in. If I let her stay, it sets a precedent where she might expect to take over my home whenever she faces a temporary problem. I also value my independence and privacy, which are being compromised. Some friends have suggested I just let her stay to keep the peace, but I feel that would be unfair to me and would reward manipulative behavior. I already helped her by allowing temporary shelter. But now she is pressuring me and spreading misinformation to make it permanent. I don't want to lose control of my own home or let her manipulate the situation. So AITA for refusing to let my friend live in my apartment permanently after she told everyone it was already hers, even though I initially offered temporary help. AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids live with me after she lost her apartment, even though my parents and extended family are pressuring me to help. I, 34F, live in a 3-bedroom house in a mid-sized city. I work full-time as a software engineer and have been living here alone for about 6 years. I have 2 cats, a routine that revolves around work and hobbies, and I value my privacy and personal space. I have a good relationship with my younger sister, Lauren, 30F, who has 2 kids, ages 7 and 10. She lives about 2 hours away from me. About a month ago, Lauren called me in a panic. Her apartment building was being sold, and she had been given only 30 days to vacate. She doesn't make much money and doesn't have savings, so she was desperate. She asked if her children could move in with me temporarily while she figured out her next steps. I was shocked. My first thought was that this is a huge disruption for me. My house isn't set up for 2 children, especially 2 active kids, and my work requires focus and long hours. I also have limited space. Even though it's a 3-bedroom house, 1 room is my office, 1 is my bedroom, and the other is my guest room. Converting my office or living room into a children's space would make working and living difficult. I told Lauren that I sympathized with her situation, but I couldn't accommodate her children long-term. I suggested alternative options like short-term rentals, extended stay hotels, or local housing programs that could help her. Lauren became upset and said she didn't trust anyone else with her kids and that I was her only option. She also mentioned that school had already started, making it difficult to find new arrangements quickly. I called my parents to discuss it, hoping they might help mediate. That's when the pressure really began. My mom said it would be the right thing for me to take them in because they're family and in need. My dad added that since I have a stable job and own a house, I have a responsibility to help. They also reminded me that they themselves are getting older and can't provide daily care anymore. I tried to explain that while I want to help, taking in 2 children would completely disrupt my life. I work long hours, and I can barely manage my own schedule as it is. My cats are stressed around new people, and I don't think I could provide the structure and attention the kids need. I offered compromises like having the kids over for a few hours after school, helping with virtual homework, or contributing to temporary childcare costs while Lauren gets settled. My parents dismissed these ideas, saying they're not enough and that I'm choosing comfort over family. Lauren also called me daily, sending increasingly emotional messages about how she didn't know what she would do and that the children needed me. She implied that if I refused, she might have to put them in daycare for long hours or leave them with friends she didn't fully trust, which she said wasn't acceptable. I reminded her that daycare or local programs exist precisely for situations like this, and that I'm happy to help her coordinate them. But she insisted that only living with me would work. When I stuck to my decision, the situation escalated. My parents and some aunts and uncles started implying that I'm being selfish and heartless. My family gatherings have become tense, and everyone seems to expect me to change my mind. Lauren has expressed guilt and frustration, claiming that if I don't help, it will permanently damage our relationship. She also argues that I'm turning my back on my family, and that my ability to provide stability makes me morally obligated to step in. I've spent countless hours trying to explain that helping doesn't require me to take them in, and that my support can take many forms. I've offered to cover part of daycare costs, help with housing applications, or even assist with job applications for temporary work Lauren could take while settling her housing situation. She refuses all of these solutions, insisting that only living with me will suffice. I feel guilty because the kids are genuinely in a tough spot, and I care about them. I also worry about my relationship with Lauren and my parents, who are clearly disappointed and subtly judgmental. But I also feel that agreeing would seriously disrupt my life, affect my mental health, and create a stressful environment for the kids. I've tried to compromise as much as possible without allowing them to live here. I've researched affordable housing, offered to speak with landlords, and even suggested a roommate option close to their school. But Lauren rejects anything that doesn't involve moving into my house. I feel like I'm being painted as the villain despite making every effort to help in practical ways. So AITA for refusing to let my sister's kids move in with me after she lost her apartment. Even though my parents and extended family say I should and insist that I'm being selfish. AITA for refusing to let my parents live in my house indefinitely after they needed a place for a few weeks. I, 38F, own a 3-bedroom house in a suburban area that I've lived in for about 10 years. I pay the mortgage, utilities, and maintenance on my own, and I take pride in keeping my home clean, organized, and secure. I live alone, and my house is my sanctuary. I've always been happy to help my parents with occasional visits, but I've set clear boundaries that my home is my private space. My parents, Carol, 65F, and Richard, 68M, recently decided to downsize from their house in another state. Their plan was to move closer to me, but their new apartment isn't ready yet. About a month ago, they called and asked if they could stay at my house for a few weeks while they sorted out the move. I agreed, thinking it would be short-term. I made it clear that they would be staying in the guest room, that I expected them to follow my house rules, and that it was temporary. They agreed. Initially, things were fine. They kept their belongings in the guest room, respected shared spaces, and didn't overstay their welcome. I reminded them a few times that this was temporary, and they assured me they understood. I also helped them research apartments and moving options, thinking that this would be a short inconvenience. 2 weeks turned into a month, and they still hadn't secured their new place. I reminded them again that my house is not a permanent solution and that they needed to finalize their move. My parents said they were still looking and asked for more time, claiming that the apartments they liked were either unavailable or too expensive. I reluctantly agreed to another week, emphasizing that it was still temporary. By the 6th week, it became clear they weren't making serious efforts to move out. Carol and Richard started leaving personal items in common areas, spending large amounts of time in the kitchen cooking, and inviting a few family friends over without asking. They began treating the house as if they had permanent residency, rearranging furniture slightly and assuming I would handle all cleaning. I told them firmly that they had overstayed and needed to make immediate arrangements. My parents argued that I had let them stay this long already, and that it would be stressful for them to move so quickly. I reminded them that while I understand emergencies happen, my home is not a temporary apartment for an indefinite period, and I have a right to my private space. The tension escalated when they started involving other relatives, claiming that I was being unreasonable and selfish, and that I should allow them to stay until they found something suitable. Some family members messaged me privately, saying I should be more compassionate, while others agreed that I was right to insist on boundaries. My parents then began sending guilt-laden messages like, "We raised you. The least you can do is help us, and you're making us feel unwelcome in our own family." They implied that refusing to let them stay is a sign of ingratitude. I tried to explain that my willingness to help does not extend to indefinite cohabitation and that I had offered other forms of assistance, such as helping them find apartments, arranging temporary storage, and coordinating moving services. They dismissed these solutions, saying it wasn't the same as living in the house. Some of my friends and coworkers have said I'm right to protect my home and that letting them stay indefinitely would be unreasonable. Other family members argue that I should prioritize my parents' needs over my comfort, especially since they are older and downsizing. I feel torn because I love my parents and want to help, but I also feel like I'm being taken advantage of. I've considered compromises, such as letting them stay for one more week if they actively search for apartments every day or contributing to short-term rental costs. My parents rejected all these suggestions, claiming that moving so quickly is impossible and that I should accommodate them. The situation has become stressful and is affecting my mental health. I feel constantly guilty because my parents are upset, but I also feel anxious and trapped in my own home. I don't want to damage my relationship with them, but I also cannot allow them to turn my private home into a permanent residence against my will. So, AITA for refusing to let my parents continue staying in my house indefinitely after they initially said it would only be temporary, even though they are now pressuring me and involving other relatives. AITA for refusing to let my adult daughter move back in with me after she lost her job and expected me to support her indefinitely. I, 52F, live alone in a 3-bedroom house that I purchased 20 years ago. I've been through a divorce, raised my daughter, Emily, 27F, mostly on my own, and worked hard to create a stable, comfortable home for us. Emily has always been ambitious, but also impulsive. She graduated from college 5 years ago and had been living independently in a nearby city, working in marketing. 2 months ago, Emily called me in tears. She had lost her job due to layoffs at her company and said she had nowhere to go. She asked if she could move back in temporarily until she found another job. I was initially hesitant, but agreed to let her stay for 2 weeks, thinking it would be a short-term solution while she got back on her feet. I explained that it would have to be temporary because I value my independence and my house and finances are my responsibility. Emily arrived, and things were fine at first. I let her use her old bedroom, and she contributed to household chores and groceries. However, by the end of the first week, she began acting as though she was moving in permanently. She started leaving clothes and personal items all over the house, used my kitchen without cleaning up, and began borrowing my car without asking. She also made frequent requests for meals that were inconvenient for me to prepare. I reminded her that the arrangement was temporary and that she needed to respect my rules. She said I was being unreasonable and that I should be supportive as her mother. She argued that since she was my daughter, I had a responsibility to accommodate her until she got back on her feet, regardless of the duration. I explained that while I wanted to help, I could not support her indefinitely and that she needed to actively search for a new job and housing. By the end of the second week, Emily had started inviting friends over without consulting me, claiming that she needed emotional support. She also began staying up late and making noise while I had early work hours. My personal space and routine were being disrupted, and my cat, who is usually calm, became stressed due to the constant activity and strangers in the house. I asked her to limit visitors and maintain a quieter schedule. She became defensive and emotional, accusing me of being unsympathetic and selfish. She also implied that I was punishing her for losing her job, even though it was due to circumstances beyond her control. I tried to calmly explain that my concern was maintaining my household and personal boundaries, not judging her failure to retain employment. Then she started suggesting that she might stay until things settled down, which she implied could be several months. I told her that this was not acceptable and that she needed to find a plan for housing within the next 2 weeks. She reacted angrily, saying I was turning my back on her and that other mothers would support their adult children in times of crisis. She even threatened to stop speaking to me if I did not change my mind. Things escalated when she began making passive-aggressive comments around the house, such as leaving notes about how a real mother would help her child in need, and posting cryptic messages on social media, implying that I was heartless. She also started taking over the kitchen, cooking her meals at odd hours, and leaving a mess for me to clean. When I confronted her about this behavior, she said I was being controlling and that she had a right to live comfortably in her mother's home. I tried to offer compromise. I would help her look for short-term rentals, provide a small financial contribution toward the first month's rent, and assist with job applications. I also offered to host a small family dinner to celebrate her birthday and help her feel supported in a controlled, limited way. She rejected all of this, claiming it wasn't enough and that I was putting conditions on helping her rather than just loving her unconditionally. At this point, I had to set firm boundaries. I told her she needed to find another place to live immediately, and if she refused, I would contact a rental agency or legal counsel to enforce my property rights. She reacted by crying, yelling, and threatening to involve my family to pressure me. Some relatives called to suggest I be more accommodating and consider what she's going through, but others supported me, saying that as an adult, Emily needed to take responsibility for her own life. Since then, Emily has moved into a short-term rental nearby, but the relationship between us is strained. She still sends messages implying that I am selfish and heartless, and some family members are upset with me for refusing her indefinite support. I feel guilty because I want to help my daughter and I care about her well-being, but I also feel that allowing her to stay indefinitely would violate my boundaries, disrupt my life, and reward irresponsible behavior. AITA for refusing to let my adult daughter move back in with me after she lost her job and expected me to support her indefinitely. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos also. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.